recognize myself for probably more than 5 minutes. So my first question goes to Judge Tenheim. Why did you tell President Biden that the CIA had deliberately misled your board about the Joe Needy's file?
I did that because the CIA misled us. I mean, we had asked, we were picking up names all along, and people were telling us about other people to ask about. And we've been after the Joe Needy's file for a while, and what we got was something very small. It looked like just a personnel file, what he got paid and, when he separated and that sort of thing. And the staff looked at it and thought it wasn't significant and sent it back. In retrospect, we shouldn't have done that. We should have asked for more. But they were told the staff was told that was all they had on Joe Needy's, which is clearly incorrect. So that's why I said that we had been deliberately misled by the CIA as to the nature of the Joe Needy's files that were there. And I think those files likely are still there and can be released and should be released.
Yeah, I'd like to actually know for the public that's tuning in that we have been in talks with Director Radcliffe, and although he's been supportive, there has, in my opinion, been an orchestrated effort previously to hide this information. And so they're, while actively searching for it, also having issues locating it. So we are trying on our end, but you are correct, sir, in that observation. And I thank you for being here today to testify to that. My next question is actually for Dr. Curtis. Was there anyone specifically on the Warren Commission that made the attempted effort, or that you felt you were being pressured to either be silenced on what you saw and or bullied and or threatened into not speaking the truth?
I was never pressured to be silent, but I did have action with Arlen Specter that was not good.
What happened, sir?
He did a deposition for me and had not told me about it ahead of time. The nurse leaned in the operating room that morning and said, the Warren Commission is in town. If you have time, go down and talk to them. So I finished my cases and went down and talked to our inspector. He was friendly and nice and was very well groomed in a beautiful suit, shiny shoes. And I had my hair all messed up in a scrub suit, dirty shoes. So it was definitely top down. And he was friendly and nice, and then started asking me biographical questions that made it obvious to me that he knew the answers to the question before he asked it. And so that made me wonder, why on earth does he know all that about me? Then he said, what did you see about the exit wound? Well, there wasn't one. Really? No, there wasn't one. And then, so he asked me 4 more times about the exit wound. And the last time he asked me is, Dr. Curtis, every other doctor has suggested and testified that there was an exit wound. And you didn't see it? No, I didn't. And so during the visit that I had with him was maybe about 20 or 30 minutes. And during that time, he made me feel that I had a reason for being in the trauma room to be sure the president died. Now, I had a wife and 2 babies at home that were completely dependent on me. If I lost my residency, it would be terribly a big problem for me. So he said, okay, now, you should wait here for a little bit before we do your deposition. I said, deposition? He said, yes, you're having to give a deposition today. And I said, well, I didn't know that. He said, well, I sent you a letter, which I didn't get. He said, do you want a lawyer? And I said, do I need a lawyer? He said, fella, you're the only one in this room that knows if you need a lawyer. Do you want me to get you one? I said, no, I don't think so. But he asked me over and over again about the exit wound. Then we got in on, then he got the committee together, and nobody that I'd ever seen before sitting behind the table, and put me on a high stool uncomfortably, and I remember my foot kept slipping off that bottle rung, and then started asking me questions. Never did bring up the exit wound. He never did say a thing about it. Till at the last, he said, "Dr. Curtis, did you see anything that was like a puncture or a opening in the trachea and or the throat?" And I said, "No." He said, but then I thought, well, the blood was right over that, so I couldn't have seen it. So I said, but that doesn't mean it wasn't there. Thank you for Dr. Curtis. That's what he wanted.
Would it be fair to say that other doctors that you worked with that were in the room that day that were responding to President Kennedy's wounds had the same observations as you? Yes or no?
There were only two of us that thought of the throat before the tracheostomy was done.
Okay.
And is that the answer?
Whatever you would like to share with Congress, sir.
So I saw it, and I don't. There was no exit wounds. That's what our inspector wanted, was an exit wound, because the magic bullet had to exit the throat to go into Governor Conley, which couldn't have happened. The magic bullet would have had to make 3 90-degree turns to do what it did. It was coming down from the window, would have had to turn right angle to be horizontal through the neck, would have had to turn right again to go over to where Governor Conley was, would have to turn right again to go into Governor Conley. It doesn't work.
Yes, sir. I can speak for myself. I do not believe in the magic bullet theory.
Bullets don't do that.
No, do not. I do not, sir. My next question is for Mr. Douglas Horn. To your knowledge, did even the Dallas Police Department or the FBI subject Lee Harvey Oswald to a paraffin test to determine whether he had fired the gun on November 22nd, 1963?
I'm going from memory, but I believe the FBI did, and he tested negative for firing a rifle. With
So
the
could-
paraffin test on his face shows he did not fire a bolt-action rifle, especially not a lousy rifle like the Mannlicher Carcano, which was an 1894 design or something.
What is the status of the record interview the author William Manchester conducted with Jacqueline Kennedy? Mr. Horn?
Well, my understanding is that, first of all, the Kennedy family liked William Manchester initially because he had written a campaign book in 1960 about the campaign. So they said, okay, why don't you write the book about the death of Jack, about the death of President Kennedy. When the book was reviewed by Jacqueline and Robert F. Kennedy, apparently Robert F. Kennedy had many objections, and so the Kennedy family sued Mr. Manchester when the books were in galley form, and they required that he take out certain portions of the text. So the lawsuit, what the lawsuit did was it said, the portions of the text that you removed will be sequestered until 2067, and the interviews you did with Jacqueline Kennedy and Robert F. Kennedy will be sequestered, withheld until 2067. So that was the result of that lawsuit. And so what we read today when we read Manchester's book is a sanitized or redacted version of his book, and we won't know what was removed until 2067. That's just very unfortunate, and I know Chairman Thunheim really made an effort to get Caroline Kennedy to agree to lift that court seal, and she didn't want to.
Also, to your knowledge, which autopsy photos are missing?
Okay, I'd be glad to answer that question. I have a list here, and it's reasonably succinct, so bear with me.
Well, you have me and Garcia here, so I
Yeah.
think
Okay, here we go.
we're at your disposal.
Here we go. I mentioned 8 sets that I know with confidence from studying the evidence as an analyst are missing. First, an overhead wide shot of JFK's body taken from a stepladder, taken by John Stringer, the Navy photographer. He testified under oath to that. Second, a large bruise atop the right lung, taken from inside the interior of the chest after the lungs were removed. So this is a large blood clot up above where the apical portion of the lung was. And that's been testified to by both Dr. Humes and Stringer that they took those photographs, so they're not in the record. Third, an entrance wound in the lower right of the skull with the scalp reflected, taken from outside the skull. And next, that same entrance wound in the lower right of the skull with the photo taken from inside the cranium after the brain was removed. So what's at issue with these two photos being missing is they would have determined definitively where was the entrance wound in the back of the head.
Would have been one of the Harper
No.
separate?
No, separate issue.
Okay.
The condition of the back of the, here's another missing photo. The condition of the back of the head after embalming and reconstruction was completed, which still showed an exit defect that could not be closed. The witness that claimed that was Sandra Spencer, a Navy photographer's mate who our general counsel, Jeremy Gunn, considered our most reliable medical witness. And so what she did was she developed color negatives and then prints of the president's body, postmortem photographs, but she said, when we deposed her, she said, oh, these pictures in the archives are horrible. We see open body cavities and a lot of blood, and the president looks really bad. She said, the photographs that I developed, he had been cleaned up, the head had been reconstructed, but there was still a hole in the back of his head even after the head was reconstructed.
So you have witness testimony that the archives photos do not reflect what?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, she testified under oath to that fact. Another missing photograph is a series, is that Robert Knudsen was a White House social photographer. He was involved with developing photography the weekend after the assassination by the president's military physician, Dr. Berkeley. So Knudsen testified to the HSCA that I developed a black and white film pack, negatives, black and white negatives, showing numerous probes in the president's body. And of course, probes are important because they determine bullet tracks. Where do bullets go in, where do they come out, if they come out. And he remembered developing them and holding them up to the light in the darkroom after they were developed, and he remembered seeing probes in the body in this black and white film pack. And in the official autopsy collection, there was no black and white film pack used in photographs of the body. They're 4 by 5 inch duplex film. They're not black and white film packs, and there are no photographs of probes in the body in the official collection. And one of the people we interviewed was Dr. Carney, who was a resident at Bethesda, and when we told him, Jeremy Gunn and I, when we told him that there were no photographs of probes in the body in the official autopsy photo collection, he became visibly agitated and his face turned bright pink. And he said, I came in and out of the morgue many times as the resident on duty that night, but I saw flashbulbs going off when there were probes in the body. And you're telling me there's no photos in the collection? We said, that's right. So 2 more that are missing, and that concludes my answer. Black and white prints were seen by numerous people showing a large exit defect in the rear of JFK's head. So Mr. Knudsen, the White House photographer, Navy Chief Knudsen, showed such photos to another White House photographer, Joe O'Donnell, the week after the president died. Black and white prints showing a big exit wound in the back of the head. There are no such photos in the collection, but Joe O'Donnell said there were, and another witness that saw those photos was Navy Corpsman Dennis David. And he was shown those photographs by the Bethesda Naval Hospital audiovisual department head, Lieutenant Commander Pitzer. The last type of photo that's missing, black and white prints of an entry wound high in the forehead, up here. Not in the temple, but high in the forehead, above the right eye. Black and white prints showing that were shown by Mr. Knudsen, by Chief Knudsen to Mr. O'Donnell. They were also seen by Dennis David when Lieutenant Commander Pitzer showed him autopsy photographs. And a third witness surfaced in the year 2010, Quentin Schwen, who lives in Cleveland, and he, during a federal job interview, believe it or not, during a federal job interview with an intelligence agency, when he was at the Rochester Institute of Technology, majoring in photography. He was shown a color-positive transparency showing an entry wound high in the forehead of JFK. So that's my kind of lengthy answer on which photographs am I confident are missing.
Thank you very much. And then real quickly, because my last line of questioning is for Mr. Bolden, what is the evidence that you refer to about an interruption of chain of custody of President Kennedy's body prior to the start of the autopsy shortly after 8 p.m.?
Right. Yeah, because of this venue and this format, I'll have to give you a streamlined answer. I'm sure everyone will appreciate that. We know for a fact that the motorcade from Andrews Air Force Base with a bronze Dallas casket in it arrived in front of Bethesda at 6:55 p.m. Remember that time. That's documented by the Secret Service report of Agent Clint Hill and by newspaper reporters. But the review board obtained an extremely important document written by a Marine Corps non-commissioned officer, Sergeant Boyjan of the United States Marine Corps. He led a team of Marines from the Marine barracks in Washington, D.C. to provide physical security at the autopsy. This was not the honor guard in dress uniforms. These were Marines from the Marine barracks to provide physical security. He wrote a report of what happened that night, and he wrote in his report dated November 26, 1963, he wrote that, and he's only talking about what happened with the president because that was his job, was to guard the president's body during the autopsy. He wrote that the casket arrived at 1835 hours. 1835 hours. That's 6:35 p.m., 20 minutes before the motorcade from Andrews arrived. And there is a considerable amount of evidence, a wide range of evidence, that the president's body really arrived by helicopter before the motorcade from Andrews. That's the broken chain of custody. And the issue here, it's a very important issue. The issue here is, if Sergeant Boyjan's report is correct, and he authenticated that to the review board staff, he authenticated that to me with a written letter and with a telephone interview. If his report is correct, then what was happening with the president's body between 6:35 p.m. and 8 o'clock when the autopsy of record started? That's almost an hour and a half. And the simple answer, the streamlined answer, appears to be that many metal fragments were removed from President Kennedy's body before the autopsy of record began. We have witnesses for this.
Those would be the bullet fragments, correct?
Yes. Tom Robinson of Gawler's Funeral Home saw a vial full of 10 tiny fragments, which he saw picked out of President Kennedy's brain. They were never placed in the record. Dennis David, HM1 Corpsman Dennis David, typed a receipt for a federal agent of 4 large bullet fragments. He thought it would be mass larger than 1 bullet and less mass than 2 bullets, somewhere between 1 and 2 bullets, 4 large fragments. He typed the receipt. He was allowed to handle the fragments by the federal agent. We wouldn't do that today. And the agent took the receipt, the typewriter ribbon, and the fragments, and they were never introduced in the record. So we also have 2 witnesses. To make a long story short, we have 2 witnesses to surgery on the cranium to get this evidence out. And Dr. Humes, the chief pathologist, said under oath to the Warren Commission that I never, to Arlen Specter, I correct myself, Dr. Humes said under oath that I never had to perform a craniotomy. I never had to saw the skull open to get the brain out. And when Dr. Fink arrived late for the autopsy, he was the outsider, the Army guy, arrived at 8:30. Humes told Dr. Fink, no sawing of the skull was necessary. So the end of my response here is that we have 2 witnesses, X-ray technician Ed Reed, under oath to the review board, and Tom Robinson, to both the House Committee and to the review board. Tom Robinson told the same account to both the HSCA and to us that he saw Dr. Humes saw the skull open. So I think bullet fragments were removed from the president's body before the autopsy of record began, and that's why we should have no confidence whatsoever in the autopsy.
Thank you very much. My next question is for you, Mr. Bolden. Mr. Bolden, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, sir, thank you for sticking with us so long. I know it's been kind of long, but if you can, real quick, what did you observe about the Secret Service investigation of President Kennedy's assassination?
It was one of the greatest cover-ups of a crime. Now, the Secret Service initiated so many cover-ups. Number one, the number of bullet fragments that were found in the car. Harry Gagnon, on November the 26th, looked at the car, the assassination automobile, and he found two cartridges laying on the front floorboard. They were very damaged. And he also observed a bullet hole in the windshield. And he was told not to let the FBI know about any of this and to get the car to Michigan somewhere where they could put a new windshield in and clean the car up. Now, the biggest thing that I was talking about was the violations of constitutional rights that followed, especially in my case, simply because I wouldn't be quiet. I was framed, I was arrested, they attempted to declare me insane. And I was put in Springfield, Missouri, forced to take drugs, mind-boggling drugs. Now that stems from the fact that on the 18th of November 1964, I was called to Washington, D.C. And so they told me they were going to give me another name, change my identity, and that I would become another individual. And that, in fact, did happen. And I think that they were setting me up for assassination myself. I think that that's what was going on. Because when they sent me to the penitentiary, they made it clear that it was a case of my being so agitated about the assassination that I wouldn't keep quiet. And so they gave me 2 trials. They had 2 convicts that I had arrested. And they put me on trial twice in 1 month. And that was never heard. They kidnapped me out of Washington, D.C., violation of my constitutional right, denied me an attorney, simply because they said I was not a player. I was not a team player. I wouldn't keep my mouth shut. And so when they did that to me, they sent me to Springfield and put me in a camp there, where I was threatened by one of the inmates. And they used that as an excuse. That on July the 7th, 1967, 2 guards came to the camp and got me and took me to what they call 2-1-E's. And they undressed me, got me naked, threw me in a cell. And the next thing I know, they were forcing medication on. The guard came by, he says, we have medication time. I said, I haven't been before a court. No court has said that I was insane. You're supposed to take me to the court. But they didn't do that. They forced me to take these drugs. One of them knocked me out. I fell on the floor. It had to go into was kidnapped out of Washington, D.C., brought to Chicago, denied an attorney by the United States attorney. It would be handwritten. I was then not given any food on that night, which was May 18, 1964. They didn't let me eat anything because they kept talking about I was not a team player and I didn't keep the mouth shut. And this is how that they control the cover-up. Agents became afraid. They didn't want to talk. And there were so many cover-ups. The chief Rowley put out a memo that said any agent that gave information other than the information that he would provide would be censored severely. Well, when they found out that I wanted to go to the Warren Commission, who was investigating the case appointed by President Johnson, I asked to go testify to the Warren Commission about what the Secret Service were doing and the type of protection that President Kennedy was receiving. And so they brought me from Washington, D.C., denied me an attorney. Every constitutional right was violated, and forced me to take medical drugs, strip me naked, remove me to such prisons. Now here I was, an ex-Secret Service agent. They locked me up with people whom I had put in jail myself. I was threatened by these people. And it really affected me and my wife, Paulina Luna, who stuck with me throughout this ordeal. And to anybody who's listening, if you have a good wife like God was, keep her. Keep her, because that's the scripture said. A double band is not easily broken. And they're talking about people like my dear wife who passed away in 2005. So I just want people to know that the constitutional rights, when I was on trial in July the 12th, the jury was debating whether or not on a verdict. The judge called the jury report and told the jury, in my opinion, Bolton is guilty of all the counts in the indictment, which were 3 counts. That jury did not find me guilty. So the judge set another trial for 2 weeks later. For 2 weeks now, a second trial. And they asked for a new judge. The judge himself, in violation of the federal procedure, heard the motion himself. And the law says that if a complainant files a motion for change of judge, that the judge who the complainant shall not make the decision as a prejudicial action. So here I am now. It took me 90 years. 90 years for anybody to look into it. It broke my heart. Because America is supposed to be the leader in constitutional right. It's supposed to be the leader in democracy. Yet, I felt so abandoned by the system, but I'm glad I did, and I would do it again, because the American people need to know the truth.
Well,
The truth will set you
Well, thank you, Mr. Bolden, and again, thank you for your testimony. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I'm Tyler Nixon, I'm counsel for Mr. Bolton, and I can just give a minute of clarification here. Mr. Bolton was in fact prosecuted on what, I've delved into this case very deeply. This was one of the most rigged, you want to talk about weaponization of the judicial system and the justice system. This man was railroaded. He had a judge, as he said, who told the jury that he believes that he was guilty. He set a new trial, and the two accusing witnesses were two men that he had arrested previously as counterfeiters. And the main witness who purportedly, out of the goodness of his heart, went to the head of the Secret Service, Maurice Martineau, to report the supposed solicitation of a bribe, which was the accusation, admitted in his trial about 4 months later that he perjured himself in Mr. Bolton's trial.
Yes, Mr. Nixon, we actually would be happy to collect all that information off record, but just due to process, as you're not a stated witness, we just have to be careful about, but we, I will say, at least I speak for myself, I do not believe that Mr. Bolden was actually guilty of a crime. I do believe that he was falsely, if you will, framed. And so on behalf of the U.S. government, we'd like to apologize to him and his family, because obviously that's not how we are supposed to treat people in this country. And so you have our sympathy and as well as our apology for the treatment of that. But we will be happy to follow up on that, because as stated, we would like to collect and make sure that this does not happen to future individuals, and that requires changing of laws and also putting protections in place. But I would like to thank all of you. We've gone way over our time today, but the fact that you all traveled in and were willing to come testify, especially you, Dr. Curtis, Mr. Bolden, Judge Tenheim, Mr. Hardway, Mr. Horn, and Ms. Coe, thank you so much for coming here today. If you do have any other information you would like to submit to the task force, we will happily accept that, and we will be following up on some of these suggestions that you have all made today. And with that, without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days in which to submit materials and additional written questions for the witnesses, which will be forwarded to the witnesses for their responses as well. If you'd like to submit anything else to the record, we'd be happily accepting of that. If there are no further business without objection, the task force stands adjourned.